In Affinity 3, you can use the image trace feature to convert any photo like this into a vector. Those vectors are made up of lots and lots of curves, and they can all be manipulated separately to create some truly weird and wonderful imagery from any photo. So let's just go with this photo. I'm just going to go over here to Vector and Image Trace, and that will convert it into a vector. And it will be made up of a lot of different designs. And you can see it's this effect. Just turned it into a vector, and it's really reduced it down to quite a simple design already. And you can modify the edge threshold to create variations of that, push it maybe up to 100 or go down to 4 or 5%. However, you can also apply effects. A variety of effects can be applied. Let's just go for a very basic one, and they're all mainly going to be blurs. So you've still got the basic image. So let's just go over here, Pixel, and then go to Filters, go to Blur, and you've got a whole range of them. Now Maximum creates some really interesting square designs. Let's just go with Maximum, and you can see the result there. Also, you could use Circular, so you could get a circle design. Maybe that might be effective as well. I'm going with 10 pixels here, but you can still see the basic image and click Apply. Now I can turn this into a vector. Of course, I could modify it with some more additional color adjustments, etc., if that was required. So Vector and Image Trace, and now you can see the results slightly different. And you can modify the threshold. Now, one feature, unfortunately, with this, doesn't tell you how many curves are going to be created. It'd be really nice if there was a value showing 800, 900 or whatever, because you could just see by changing this, you get more, or obviously in this case, a lot less of the curves, and click Apply. Now, you can then go to Layers. The Layer panel you can find in the Window menu and General. So just go down here and you've got Layers. And you can expand it out. It's made up of lots and lots of vector curves. These are just paths that you can manipulate in countless ways. You can also apply effects to them. So let's just go here to Polyline, first one, hold down the Shift, all the way down. Now, some of the later ones there are actually sort of bigger chunk thing. You might select them or not select them. I'm just going to go for everything. And you can see I've got 1,142 objects. Now, a different effect may result in less objects or more objects, so I can't say. Okay, so once you've got that, what can you do next? Well, they're layers, and you can apply layer effects. You can also do transforms, and that's why that panel's there as well. But I'm going to do that a little bit later. So first thing, let's go to effects. Just click here, and it can be applied to the whole lot. All 1,000 odd will be processed at the same time. So, well, sort of the same time anyway. Click effects. And now with this, you've got this panel. And you can, of course, modify the settings. Let's just push this up so you can see it there. And you can go for Bevel and Emboss. Just select that. And you can see you get that just from a basic effect there. And you can then go up here and change the settings. So just try it out inner. Maybe go with outer, and the obviously result will be slightly different each and every time. You get more sort of jigsaw puzzle like effect. This creates a very abstract design there with slightly objects all slightly raised. You can also modify directions, profiles, etc. So just click and try them. You don't have to use them, but you can see if you use one, you can see that maybe is what you want. And remove profile. You can also go and try some others. Really good is this one. Just go here, maybe go for gradient overlay, and this creates some truly abstract designs super quick. You can see here, very abstract cityscape now with that. And again, you can modify the settings here. So just go to scale X or scale Y, and it changes the end result. You can also change the angle. So just modify that, turn that around, and that will result in a slightly different image as well. And of course, you can also combine with these as well. So you don't have to just go with gradient overlay. You can go with Bevel and Emboss. So you've got that and the gradient overlay. You can also add additional gradient overlays as well. You can also change the colours. So you don't have to go for this, obviously, grayscale design, which I think is quite effective still for maybe a nighttime scene. I think this looks great for sort of, if you've got Gotham City or something, that sort of thing. Maybe Batman design, I guess. And just click here, and you could just click this and click the colour. Maybe go for red. Different colour, different effect. Maybe you've got that sort of a lava-like effect there. Click here. Maybe go for a garish green, and so on. So literally thousands of different colour designs, sort of gradient map effects can be added very quickly using this. You can also click on here and just click there and maybe go for a different one. So different effects can be combined with multiple colours as well. And then, of course, close. You can also apply other blur effects. So again, this image, of course, it could be any other image as well. Obviously, of New York here, but let's just go for pixel and down to filters. And in here, I'm going to go with maybe this one. This is quite effective as well. Box, just a box effect, and go with something like that. You can still make out the city. And this effect probably will create even less lines and vectors. So let's just go with this. Now I'm going with 31 here. Obviously, it depends on the size of the document. It's about 2,000, 3,000, etc. And with this, just click apply. And of course, you can always apply it multiple times. Maybe combine the effects. So you can have this one with the maximum, or maybe use minimum. Use circular, use square, etc. Okay, let's go down here to vector, and again, image trace. And it will be using this box blur effect this time. And now you get this. Not so effective. Well, you can reduce it down, of course. Let's just reduce it down. And you see, as you do that, you get a few more coming in, and you can, of course, reduce it down all the way as far as you want. And you can still look at it and say, well, it sort of still looks like a cityscape. I'm quite happy with that. And that's at 3%. So click apply. So you can see there's no guarantee 1 or 3% or 5% or 10% I can recommend. Depends on the picture, of course, as well. So you've got this sort of very hazy looking image of New York now. Very unusual one. Well, exactly the same as before. You can always go over here and expand this again. And you can see that's made up of lots and lots of curves again. In this case, I think it's going to be less. I might be wrong. I haven't counted them. And unfortunately, it would be nice, let's say, image trace, if it showed. It would be great. Oh no, 3,760. There's a lot more, actually. Very strange. Doing tests, it was the opposite. It was actually a lot less. But still, I'm happy with that. Perhaps I didn't exactly set the right setting. Okay. What you can now do, exactly the same. So go to effects, click there, and then I can go maybe 3D this time. And you can see then you get this, which is very unusual plastic wrap kind of effect. I mean, it's pretty extreme. Obviously got these lovely lines, and that's, I think, the box blur effect. Of course, you could combine this maybe with some warping features, just to create some variation of distortions. Up to you, of course, to create whatever you want with this. But I think this creates, especially with lovely, obviously, the clouds and the sky there, I think it just creates a very interesting effect. Well, again, you can modify the radius. You can vary that. You can also make, obviously, that pushes it up, makes it very, very sort of blobby-like effect. That's very surreal. Sort of thing that you'd probably be surrealistic painting would have that sort of effect. I think that would be brilliant for a Dali-like picture, I think. Or, I don't know. Please put in the comments below if you can name the artist that would have a sort of effect like that. It's possible. However, maybe Hockney, I don't know. No, I don't think Hockney's ever done anything like that. However, what you can also do is, again, just go for the gradient overlay. So just go here, gradient overlay. And you can see now, obviously you've got the gradient with this. And you've got blend as well. So you can always go here, blend mode, and just go here, darken. So you can still bring in the colours if you want. You've still got the grayscale effect. And also maybe go with linear burn. I always find that always creates some interesting, very dark and ominous. Imagine that. I think that would be brilliant in a book illustration. You imagine a dark city like that. I think that's very foreboding sort of image. I think that really does look yes, science fiction like horror dystopian looking effect there. And again, I mean, the city there Vincent van Gogh? I don't know. But still, click close. So you've got that. And that is with, of course, layer effects. But there's also something else, and that's that panel, transform. We've got all of the various curves selected, and that's the key thing, because you can go over here and you've got transform here. However, there is a setting here in the context toolbar. Now, I haven't been really talking about the context toolbar, but you know, it's got, obviously says 3,768. That's a lot. Obviously, depending on the power of your machine, it may take more or less time. With some machines, it'll probably be instant. Now, what you can do, you can go here and you can click this. It doesn't look much. Transform objects separately. Pity there's no transform objects randomly. That would be brilliant. But still, we haven't got it. What we've got is transform objects separately. And I've just turned it on. I must admit, with Affinity 3, as with many applications, sometimes it's not obvious which is on or off. This is definitely, I think, on. Okay, so we've got that. And now what you can do is you can go up here. And you've got this rotation field. And also you can got the settings here. And you can just change there. Just change origin point. And instead of there, I've got 0. I can enter 20. Let's just enter a low value. Let's not go too far. And then straight away, you get this very, very quick move of the city sort of obviously going at an angle. But it's not the same as if it was all together. You just get the whole thing turning and the picture would still be the same. But now you've got all this lovely break areas there. And you don't have to go with 20. I mean, I've gone with 20 there. Let's just go for something a bit, 7, say. So a bit smaller. So 7, something like that. Undo again. Maybe change the origin. You can just change things. Just try it out. 10. And get a variety of different designs that way. It always seems to go back to that. Very odd. But you can change that. And you can also change the shear as well. Let's just change the shear. And I'm just changing that. So you can... Now, unfortunately, there's no reset feature. So to put it back, it doesn't seem to be a reset feature anyway. Maybe there's a reset down here. Nope. So what you can do, you just enter value 0 again. And it will put it back to that. And put this back to 0. Now, you've got this. You've also got this as well. Now, I could obviously move the X. All that will happen is that they all move at the same. Let's try it. So if I put 100 in there, it just shifts over, which is not particularly anything exciting unless you want it shoved over like that. There's no wraparound feature or anything, which would be cool as well. However, what you can do is you've got width. And you can then just go there, and I'm just going to enter a value, 10. And you can see now it stretches it at that very weird angle, just straight. And you can of course make it 20, say. So 20, the width is 20. To get that real sort of like dragging Art Deco like effect, it's like motion flying off. However, let's just undo that from there, put it back to 2.3, back to what it was. And then let's just go to this, which you can then put in a value of say 20 this way. So height. And now you get this very weird sort of dragging down effect, sort of like oozing. And you can put obviously any value in 4. So 4 there or something like that to create all kinds of very abstract sort of drag down effect, melting effects inside Affinity. And you can see this effect. And that's the transform that can be applied. And of course, I've got this design. I've got all selected. I can always still go back here and click effects. And instead of that, I can change this gradient. So click there and just change this, maybe do a different color. And obviously you can see the result of that. You can get this very hellish like effect there. I think that just creates a very, and also not only that, you can rotate the angle. So you can just change that and 3D can be changed, modify that again, profiles, all those kind of things, all can be tweaked still for all of those different things, and maybe combine it with bevel emboss as well to create additional, don't know what's happening there, but pillow, let's just reduce that down a bit. You can see literally thousands of different designs all created just by modifying the layer effect as well as obviously the transform. You can also apply other effects, but how to actually convert it back into a raster image. Well, let's just go and apply another effect. So let's go to Pixel, Filters and Blur, and just go down to this one, Zoom. Zoom effect's great, just pushes it out from a certain point, and you can vary the point, all those kind of things, and of course set the radius setting. I'm going for something small, 25.3, and you can see the city sort of just expanding out there. And click Apply. Exactly same as before, you can now go to Vector and Image Trace. So Image Trace, and you can see the result of that. I think that creates like the pyramid effect in Photoshop, sort of. You've got this sort of effect of the lines coming out. Maybe I haven't got the squares or anything, a three-dimensional look. And you can, of course, modify the threshold, and you can vary this, and you can see you get more or less. In this case, when you push it up to 92, a lot less. And I'm going to go with about 3%. So now click Apply. And what I can now do is I can then select them all again, go over here, then select all these, exact same as before, all selected. Again, I can go to Effects, and this time I could go with Outline. Outline's pretty good. Set the radius, and that creates an interesting edge effect like that. It gives a line effect to your image, which I think is quite a nice sort of abstract design. And again, you could add 3D, all those kind of things, but I'm just going to go with this. Or maybe add color overlay. So this time, it's obviously black is the default one, not very useful, but what you can do if you've got 3D does actually look quite effective with the 3D. So if I go with 3D and change the radius here, you can see you get quite an interesting visual effect once it processes it like this, which I think is quite an interesting design. It does take a few seconds to process and hasn't updated at this point. However, I don't want that. Don't want the 3D, and I've lost it for some reason. Sometimes what happens if you go off the layers, and this is always worth knowing, just go back and make certain you select them all again and hold down the shift so you actually select them all selected, go to Effects, and then you get this. It does happen occasionally. I just go off and I think, oh, that's strange. I've suddenly lost access to the settings here. Okay, I don't particularly want the 3D effect, so just turn that off. And again, go to Color Overlay and click here and maybe go with a solid color like red there. And you got that. Of course, you've got the outline in black so you can still see it. So I think that's quite an interesting design. You've also got this option for plus. So you could add multiple outlines, multiple color overlays, again, gradient, etc. But let's close. So you've got this design. Once you've got it, you can now, of course, rasterize the whole thing. Just turn it back into the original pixel layer. It's not going to look the same, of course. Now, a good thing would maybe create a duplicate before you start all of this of the background, so you could then combine it later if you wish. So let's just go and rasterize it. They're all selected. So I don't want to do that. I just want to go to the background. All I need to do, right click and rasterize. And then takes a few seconds to process, and they'll all be rasterized. And there you have it, just a complete single layer. Now, again, as mentioned, you could have the original image as well, combine it in different ways using blend modes. But also what you can do is you can take this image, you've got all these lovely lines now, and do exactly the same as before. So you could always go to Vector and go down to Image Trace. And the Image Trace, that's now turned it into a vector design, increasingly becoming quite an abstract cartoon-like comic book style. I think that becomes very, very much an inked image that you can then sort of losing the impact of where the city is, but there is sort of, there's the environment, etc. And of course you can modify the threshold and the result will be slightly different, obviously depending on that. I'm going to go with 7% and click Apply. Exactly the same as before. You've now got lots of curves, and you could of course repeat it, rasterize it, etc. if you want later, but I'm just going to select all of those, and again, ooh, got 7,717. That's a lot of layers this is working with. And again, click Effects, and if you want to add now 3D to this, you can now add it and you can see the result of that. And again, you can of course modify the direction, modify the profile, and so on. You can see that creates a very, very unusual padded sort of effect there. I think that's quite nice. So click close. I'm just going to go with that. Again, you could just then rasterize it all into a single pixel layer and then export it and print that design off. In Affinity 3, there are many other tools, such as the contour tool. This was originally in Designer. It is now here in the Vector Studio feature. So, Vector Studio, and here you'll notice I've got a background duplication. All you need to duplicate is right click and then duplicate. So I'm just going to keep this one just at the background so I can then combine it later. So let's just deselect it for now, and I'm just going to work with this layer on top. So let's just go and apply effect, pixel, and then down here to filters and blur and Gaussian. Just apply a slight blur, only subtle blur just there, just to reduce down the number of vectors that will be generated. So 3.3 I'm going with, click apply. Then pixel, filters, and then down to this blur, and I'm going to go again with zoom. Really like the zoom effect, so zoom effect, and you can see there. Now you can of course move it. You can change origin points. You can see by changing the position, maybe push it up to top, so it all just sort of zooms up to that top there. And you can of course vary the setting here. I'm going with 35, and you can see I can push that to say 46. You can see it all dragging off in that direction. So when I create the vector, hopefully there'll be a lot less paths created. Unfortunately, it doesn't say in the actual control. It'd be really nice if it did. Okay, so vector and image trace. And then you can see you get this edge threshold, and you can vary it. Of course, you can just change this. Say if you go too far, just quite grey. So push the threshold really quite low. And unfortunately, 0% is the lowest you're going to get. But you could, I'd hope a bit more, but still, you can modify this curve fitting tolerance. I'm just going to go with that 100%, so 0, 100, and click apply. And you can still just about make out New York there, I think. But now, instead of what we had before, which was a pixel layer, now you've got vector. And it's made up of lots of curves. So let's just select the top one and go all the way down to the bottom one, hold down the shift, and you've got this. Well, now I can use this approach. I'm going to go with the contour tool. So where's the contour tool? It's just down here. Here's the contour tool. And this is in the vector. So vector, contour. So it's a sort of weird circular design. Now there's a number of options. And here's the context toolbar. With this, probably easier just to enter a value. I would suggest that's probably the easiest way. So if you want, let's just go and enter, say, 30. So just see what happens. 30, this is using the default settings here of this one, rounded joins, and also going for auto close. So just tab off that, and then you will see you get this. And let's just, now I could just deselect it, and you can see what happens. It creates a very weird circular effect. I think that creates quite an interesting visual effect there. Now you might not particularly want that one, and of course you can just undo it. So put it back to like that. Just undo. You can also enter, say, -20. Just try a few things. So -20, then you get this. You get sort of a gap. Now that is why I've actually also got the original. So I'm just going to -10, and you can see you get this. Well, these layers you can also add, of course. Go over here, add some effects. If you want, you can just give a bit of raise. Let's just go for 3D. I'm just going to go 3D, just so it sort of stands out a little bit more, maybe not that much, 2.4, something like that. You can see then you create this sort of unusual visual effect. And you've still got all the other things as well, color overlay, gradient overlay, etc. So close there, and you can see you get that. You can also modify these. You can just click here. It's live, so you can modify it at any point. You can change these, and it's very subtle in game. This creates a sort of more rougher sort of edge effect, I think, than the smoother one there, round joins. Now you can also use this one, which is great for creating a more sort of stroke or line effect. So force open, just click there. So force open, and then you get this, which, let's just click off that again. You can see now you get this linear effect, a very odd linear effect with a sort of rounding effect and sort of blobs of paint that have been added. But of course, I did keep here, and let's just quickly drag this down so you can see it. This one, background here, just select that and then just click here so it's visible again. And now you can see obviously you've got the underlying image, and also you've got this now visual effect applied on top of obviously that image as well. And of course you can always apply blending modes between these as well. It doesn't have to be just applied just as a normal, but you can see create some interesting designs. And again, you can always select all of them. Let's just again select all. And you can, of course, if you don't want that effect, you might not want that, you can always click there, turn it off, and you get that more smudgier sort of effect there. But you can also go for gradient overlay, and you get that effect applied, or a color overlay effect. Okay, it defaults to black, but you can put it to red or another color, etc. Another thing, you could go for outer shadow. Maybe there, turn that off. Let's just go to outer shadow, change the radius, change the offset, and intensity. You might want to reduce that down, click close. And then let's just click off there, and you can see you get this very unusual sort of shadowy effect with all these different vectors all added on top of this, of course, original image. And again, if you don't want the original image there, it's there if you want it, of course. You can deselect this and you get, again, just obviously a very more sparse looking effect, which are still all live. So you can still go here and go up there and change it. If you decide, you know what, contour tool, that you're not particularly happy with that setting, you can always go for this one again, or go with putting this to 10 instead, and so on. A whole variety of different designs can be created super quick in using this contour tool. And again, deselect that so you can see all the various curves with the shadow effect. Hope you found this of interest. Any questions and thoughts, please let me know in the comments below. It's one of these ones I'll probably be exploring later, because there's a lot of other possibilities with this approach to create some truly unique designs.